John Matthews sat in his lavish office, papers strewn about his desk, each complaint letter echoing the discontent radiating from his employees. The frustration and pain expressed in their words weighed heavily on him. He leaned back in his chair, running a hand over his face, trying to process the reality that he had ignored for too long. A fellow executive entered the room, shaking his head. "John, the morale is at an all-time low. You have to do something." "I know," John replied, his voice lacking conviction. "But what can I do? These complaints are just the beginning of a much deeper issue. They're afraid to speak up." "It's more than fear," the executive said, frustration bubbling up. "It's a systemic issue. They don't feel safe here." As the meeting progressed, whispers echoed around the room, snippets of conversation reaching John's ears. "Did you hear about the layoffs? They let go of those employees unfairly." "Yeah, it's always us. They don't care about our struggles," another voice chimed in. These interactions struck John like a jolt of electricity, momentarily exposing the struggle of employees battling systemic injustices, and he couldn't ignore it any longer. They were just voices in the wind before, but now they were individuals, lives, families, futures, threatened by the very system he had helped uphold. He felt a sinking sensation in his stomach as realization dawned on him. As he sifted through heartfelt complaints, each letter resonated deeply within him, revealing the suffering of those he once overlooked. "I need to understand," he mumbled to himself, grappling with a flood of guilt. How had he not noticed the pain etched on their faces? The silence in the room became unbearable, forcing a moment of reflection that haunted him. His privilege had shielded him from the reality faced by his employees. He had been blind to their struggles and the bias that clouded his understanding. The idea of working as a janitor took shape in his mind, a way to absorb the truth firsthand. "I need to see what it's really like," he decided, determination igniting within him. "I'll work undercover. I'll shed this corporate image and experience their challenges." That evening, John donned the janitor's uniform, a complete transformation from CEO to an unseen member of his own company. As he walked through the doors, vulnerability surged through him. Stepping into this new role, he could feel the unfamiliarity drape over him like a heavy cloak amidst the thrum of corporate life. His initial encounters with the employees unveiled a world riddled with hidden battles. Racial tensions simmered beneath the surface, stories of prejudice waiting to be heard. As he cleaned, John engaged in conversation, noting their hurried glances and cautious tones. "We can't really trust management," one remarked as he cleared the table. "They don't care about us." As he navigated through the daily grind, mopping floors and emptying trash, acts of subtle racism played out around him. A brief exchange between co-workers hinted at their struggles, igniting a flicker of anger and a sense of responsibility within him. He couldn't stay silent. He could no longer ignore their pain. Through his interactions with employees, John forged emotional connections, realizing that their struggles intertwined with his journey, their stories echoing the vestiges of his own upbringing. The conversations began to awaken empathy, further igniting his commitment to driving change within the company. By the end of his first week, John's experiences morphed into life-changing revelations. He was unknowingly stepping onto a path that would shatter his preconceived notions, reshaping his understanding of justice. He was no longer just the CEO. He was part of a collective fight for dignity and equality. Determined, he knew he would advocate for those who had been sidelined, confronting the oppressive forces that had sought to silence them. As the realization of this responsibility settled in, John prepared to face the vicious reality of what lay ahead, ready to stand against an unjust system with the courage to lead a movement for change. John adjusted the janitor's uniform, feeling the fabric scratch against his skin as he stepped into the familiar office building. This was his realm, yet it felt entirely foreign now. Each step echoed louder than usual, nerves tingling with anticipation. Today, he would see his company from an entirely different perspective. As he pushed the cleaning cart through the corridor, he noticed employees glancing at him with skepticism. Whispers floated through the air, punctured by soft laughs and side glances that made John feel painfully out of place. The CEO they respected was now just another worker in the shadows, unrecognized among the everyday grind. "Hey, can you get that corner over there?" one employee called out, gesturing dismissively. The tone stung, igniting a conflicted pang of humility in John's chest. "Sure thing," he replied, forcing a smile as he set to work. But as he watched the hustle and bustle of the employees, their faces lined with stress, the gravity of their routines began to weigh heavily on him. They juggled responsibilities, working tirelessly under deadlines, all while unappreciated. He paused, observing how the office atmosphere buzzed with the constant anxiety of their daily lives. The stark contrast from his previous role, where he dictated terms, hit him hard. Shadows of doubt crept into his mind as he reflected on the privilege that had always surrounded him. As he continued cleaning, he overheard two employees during a break, huddled close together. I can't believe I got passed over for a promotion again, one lamented, shaking her head. They don't want someone like me in leadership. I know, right? The other replied. It's all about fitting in, and we'll never fit the mold they expect. Their words resonated deep within him, forcing him to see beyond corporate metrics and recognize the personal struggles that define their lives. He felt an immediate connection, leaning in to hear more of their stories, realizing he had never truly understood the burdens borne by those around him. Hey, you all right? Came a voice from behind. An older janitor, Mr. Thompson, watching him with a knowing glance. You seem a bit lost. Just thinking, John replied, wiping at the counter. It's crazy how much we don't see. Mr. Thompson nodded, his wise eyes reflecting the years of experience he'd gathered. You think this system is fair? You ever wonder how many have been pushed aside like discarded trash? John winced, the weight of Mr. Thompson's words hitting home. His mind drifted to flashbacks of his privileged background, where ignorance shielded him from the harsh reality faced by employees like Thompson. How had he gone so long without understanding? Every exchange deepened John's conflict. Was he equipped to help those whose struggles were so far removed from his own? The system felt like a monster too big to challenge, an intimidating wall built on layers of discrimination and blind eyes. Yet as John forged connections through small conversations, he witnessed glimmers of camaraderie, a strong community that existed despite ongoing hardships. A shared laugh here, a kind word there, constructive resilience blossomed amidst adversity. As the day wore on, John's journey shifted with one pivotal moment. He saw a fellow janitor, a black woman, unjustly reprimanded by a manager for taking a break. You think you can just slack off? The manager barked, his voice loud and piercing. Sir, I just needed a quick moment. She started, but the manager cut her off, his face red with indignation. Get back to work, he snapped, waving her off mercilessly. Fury surged within John. He couldn't just stand by and watch. That's not right, he shouted, stepping forward. The manager turned, fuming at John's unexpected intrusion. And who are you to speak up? I'm someone who believes in treating people with respect, John replied, his courage ignited by the injustice unfolding. The moment crystallized for John. He couldn't just observe anymore. With this act of defiance, he vowed to use his privilege not just for visibility but to fuel real change for his coworkers. As the day ended, the heavy weight of responsibility settled over him like a cloak. His path was now clearer, a newfound commitment to advocate for those battling invisible chains of oppression. The journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, but in the embers of accountability, empowerment sparked to life. He was ready to embrace the fight, fully aware of the storm brewing both inside and outside the walls of the company. John moved through the office, the unease thick in the air. As he passed different cubicles, he felt the weight of whispered conversations and guarded glances. Something was off and he could feel it in his bones. Their usual camaraderie had a sharp edge, and he couldn't ignore the cloud of unrest looming over the team. Did you hear about the latest round of layoffs? It's getting ridiculous, one employee whispered, glancing around nervously. Yeah, people are scared to say anything. We can't afford to lose our jobs, another replied, their voice barely above a whisper. Taking a deep breath, John decided to join them for lunch. As he settled down at the table, he absorbed the frustration bubbling beneath the surface. Hey, what's this about layoffs? He asked, trying to inject some light into the conversation. One of the employees, a woman named Tanya, looked up, her eyes filled with concern. We heard some people are being cut, but no one knows who or why. It's like they want us to fear speaking out, especially with how things have gotten. Another chimed in. It feels like we're walking on eggshells. If anyone says anything that ruffles management's feathers, you're out. The pressure of fear settled into John's chest. This wasn't just about layoffs. It was a reflection of a deeper issue, an oppressive environment cultivated by the leadership that stifled dissent. We shouldn't have to feel like this, he stated firmly, feeling a spark of defiance building within him. Later that evening, as he sifted through company emails for insights on the layoffs, a disturbing discovery struck him. John unearthed a series of messages indicating an impending lawsuit from a group of employees against the company for discriminatory practices, underscoring the systemic issues present. His heart raced as he pieced together the exploitation ingrained in the company's practices. How could they let this happen? He murmured, the realization washing over him like cold water. He leaned back in his chair, his attention caught by one name amidst the emails. Sarah, the SO. As he connected her name with the troubling patterns he had unearthed, everything began to crystallize. She had been orchestrating a culture of silence and submission, prioritizing profits over people at every turn. A sense of betrayal sliced through him, sharp and painful. He thought of the trust he had placed in her, only to discover that she had manipulated the very people she was meant to protect. He closed his eyes, mentally preparing himself for a confrontation that was long overdue. With each passing moment, the tension grew. He needed to confront Sarah about her unethical practices and how they impacted the employees. As he approached her office, he could feel his heart pounding, the anticipation hanging heavily in the air. "Sarah," he started, stepping into her office where she sat, a picture of composed authority. "We need to talk about what's been happening with the layoffs and the culture here." Her expression shifted, a flicker of annoyance passing over her features. "John, I don't think this is appropriate." "I saw the emails," he interjected, his voice steady as he pressed on. "I'm not going to let this go. We need to address the discrimination that's been occurring." Her eyes narrowed, the facade slipping as she leaned back in her chair. "You know, if you push this, there will be consequences. Don't make it personal." "It is personal," he shot back, fury igniting within him. "You're ruining lives, Sarah. This isn't about business. This is about people. Our people." The charge in the air crackled between them as Sarah's demeanor hardened. "You have no idea what you're getting into," she warned, fabricating excuses, her voice curling with malice. "This is a business, John. You're not looking at the bigger picture. Do you even see the people you're stepping on? They deserve better." In that moment, John could feel the walls closing in, and the stakes heightening as Sarah's manipulative tactics became clear. As their confrontation escalated, it became evident that his integrity stood in stark contrast to her ruthless ambition. As he stepped away from her, uncertainty lingered with him like a shadow. He had exposed one enemy, but the fear of additional betrayals haunted his thoughts. Who else might be siding with Sarah? John knew they had to remain vigilant, for the battle against systemic oppression was far from over, and with every fight, new enemies could emerge from the shadows. During a brief respite from the relentless grind of corporate life, John's eyes flicked over to Melanie, who sat quietly in the meeting room, seemingly absorbed in her notes. As one of the few remaining employees still engaged with the company's issues, her sharp gaze betrayed a fiery determination as she meticulously recorded the unfolding injustices. "Melanie," he called, intrigued as he approached her after the meeting. "You seemed deeply invested in the discussion. Anything stand out?" She looked up, her brow furrowed with passion. "It's hard not to notice how many of our colleagues feel trapped. The fear of speaking out is palpable. They don't feel safe here anymore." "I know what you mean," John responded, feeling a connection spark. "They deserve to be heard. They deserve justice." As they shared a moment over coffee, John felt an unexpected warmth fill the gap that had always kept them apart. "I've seen enough of this corporate greed. It disgusts me. People like us, we've got to fight for workers' rights, for accountability." Melanie's voice took on a passionate fervor, the kind that ignited a flame in John's own chest. "You want to know the truth? My family sacrificed everything to come here. They fled their country for a better life, and I owe it to them to stand up for those who can't. I won't let their hope go to waste." John felt empathy wash over him as he listened to Melanie recount her family's journey, the hardships they faced for the sake of education and opportunity. He recognized a shared desire for social justice, how their backgrounds had shaped their realities. "I didn't realize," he admitted, his voice catching. "It makes me rethink everything." As passion built, she revealed how her friends and co-workers had banded together to expose the corrupt practices of management. "We're organizing, but it's dangerous. They'll fight back, and we need to be smart about how we move," she urged, her eyes fierce with purpose. John couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope igniting within him. "If we align our efforts, we might actually make a difference," he proposed, enthusiasm sparking in his words. "We can mobilize everyone to push back against Sarah's narrative." "That's the spirit," Melanie replied, her smile brightening the dim coffee shop. But then her expression shifted slightly, revealing a moment of vulnerability. "Just know that if we're caught, my past as a worker might jeopardize us both. We are risking a lot." "I'm ready to take that risk," John affirmed, feeling a renewed sense of strength. "I trust you, and together we're stronger." Her eyes softened with gratitude, and they began to forge a plan. They brainstormed strategies to gather more information, the urgency of their mission palpable in the air. "We need to document everything, set up meetings to spread the word among our co-workers. Their stories matter," John said, determination coloring his voice. The clock ticked away as they filled pages with ideas, thoughts solidifying into actionable steps. But with the weight of their mission ahead, John couldn't shake off the self-doubt creeping back in. "If our words aren't enough to challenge the powers at play, what can we do? Every voice counts," Melanie reminded him firmly, her conviction stirring something deep inside. "We have the power to challenge the status quo. The real victory lies in our persistence, in our unity." A sense of urgency enveloped them as they prepared to rally co-workers. "John," Melanie said quietly, "we need to be careful. Management is surely watching us. We have to move stealthily. As the day wound down, fatigue washed over them, but neither wanted to quit. The bond they were forging transcended mere strategy. It grew into a friendship, a partnership fueled by mutual respect and shared goals. They reaffirmed their commitment to stand alongside each other, knowing the strength they derived from their unity would be pivotal in the battles ahead. Tomorrow, John declared, excitement swirling through him, we take our first step, and together, we will fight for every voice that has been silenced. They left the cafe, their hearts pounding with anticipation of what lay ahead, knowing that they were ready to face whatever storm might come. Only one thing was certain: they wouldn't back down. A longtime employee, Ms. Thompson, stood before her manager, her voice unwavering. I deserve the chance to speak up about the discrimination in our department. This culture is toxic, and many of us feel it. Before she could finish, she was cut off. We can't afford troublemakers, Ms. Thompson. Your position is terminated effective immediately. The words hung in the air like smoke, each syllable a stamp of injustice. Shockwaves rippled through the office as John Matthews lingered nearby, his heart racing. He witnessed the disbelief etched on the faces of his coworkers, emotions swirling in a turbulent mix of anger and sadness. They can't just do this, one colleague murmured, eyes wide. She's one of the best. As whispers of outrage spread, the tension turned into a murmur of solidarity. We can't let them get away with this, another voice added, igniting embers of refusal to accept this as the norm. John stood frozen, grappling with how to respond. He hadn't expected such blatant injustice to erupt over an issue so many faced daily. This can't be the end, he resolved inwardly. He finally stepped forward, clarity sharpening his focus. Familiar conversations arose in hushed tones, the room around him buzzing with indignation. Employees gathered, recounting their own brushes with unfair treatment, each story adding to the atmosphere of systemic fear that had permeated their workplace. I've been overlooked for promotions, too, a young woman confessed. They always pick the same faces. Inspired by Ms. Thompson's courage, John felt a surge of determination. If we don't stand up now, when will we? He announced, feeling empowered by his own sense of purpose. We need to gather evidence of what's happening here and show them we're not afraid to fight. As the others nodded, he exchanged glances with Melanie, who wore an expression of fierce resolve. Count me in, she declared. We'll collect testimonies, document everything. We can't let fear dictate our future. They slipped away to a nearby coffee shop, where ideas flowed as freely as their shared frustration. We can organize a petition, John suggested, excitement slowly replacing his earlier apprehension. If we get enough signatures, we can demand fairness and transparency. Melanie chimed in, and we need to record personal stories. Each signature represents someone who deserves to be heard, someone who's been pressed. This isn't just about us anymore. It's about every employee. As they drafted their plan, John felt the weight of self-doubt creeping in. What if they retaliate? What if this puts us in danger? He questioned, vulnerability threading through his voice. Melanie noticed his hesitation. I understand your fears, John, but we have to think about the bigger picture. I faced prejudice, and now I'm choosing to fight back. We can do this together. I promise. Her words reignited a fire within him. You're right, he replied, conviction rising. We can be the change we want to see. We'll stand together against injustice. With their plans taking shape, news of their efforts spread through the office like wildfire. As employees rallied around the idea of fighting back, a palpable sense of unity enveloped the group, vibrating with hope and determination. When the time came to confront management at the quarterly meeting, John felt both exhilarated and terrified. This is a bold move, he whispered to Melanie as they prepared their statements, the adrenaline tingling in the air. We have to show them we mean business, she replied, her confidence infectious. No more sitting back in silence. But the stakes were real, and as they gathered their courage, anxiety snaked through John's chest. What if they fire us next? He contemplated, worrying clanging in his mind. Let them try, Melanie said defiantly. They can't silence the truth forever. We'll keep pushing forward, and it starts today. As the meeting approached, John stood before a mirror, staring at his reflection to find strength in his resolve. He knew that fighting for justice wasn't just about him. It was about every voice that had been silenced by fear. He took a deep breath, ready to rise for the community that had given him hope, fueled by shared stories, dreams of equality, and an unyielding desire to break the chains of prejudice. An anonymous tip circulates around the office, whispers of uncertainty growing louder among the employees. Did you hear about John and Melanie? They're planning something big against management. One person says, glancing around nervously. John pauses, tension prickling at the back of his neck as he senses the eyes on him. He already feels the weight of suspicion bearing down, uncertainty seeping into the tight-knit group they've built. What are they saying now? He mutters under his breath, a knot tightening in his stomach. As he moves through the day, the air feels thick with anxiety. Co-workers exchange quiet whispers, casting furtive glances in his direction. I don't know if we should get involved. What if this backfires? One voice quivers. John's heart races as paranoia curls around him like a heavy fog. Their rallying cries for justice might be transforming into whispers of doubt amongst those who had stood united just days before. He knows he must regain their trust. During a covert meeting with Melanie, John overhears a conversation just outside the conference room. I heard one of them is working with management. They're feeding them information. A voice whispers. His body stiffens. A mole? Who could it be? The unease churns in his gut as a cold sweat breaks out on his forehead. We need to be careful, he whispers to Melanie, who looks equally shaken. In a moment of confrontation, John's heart sinks as he pulls Alex aside, his trusted friend from HR, who's been known for his loyalty. We need to talk, John says, his tone betraying the gravity of the situation. Are you the one leaking information to Sarah? Me? John, how could you even think that? Alex replies, shock rippling across his features. His attempt to sound offended only raises further suspicion in John's mind. You were supposed to help us, not sell us out. John shouts, anguish twisting in his voice. We thought we were in this together. Alex stammers. I don't have to do anything. I'm trying to keep myself safe. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. His defensiveness only heightens John's growing anger. What do you think this is? Just a game? People are losing their jobs because of Sarah's tactics. John counters, another wave of disbelief washing over him as he grapples with the weight of disloyalty. In that moment of tension, he recalls all those stories shared by employees who had been hurt by the system. Their struggles reignite a fire within him, pushing him to press forward against the odds, despite betrayal seeping into their mission. I can't let this stop us, he vows to Melanie later that evening as they reflect on the confrontation. We have to rally the others. As night falls, the darkness outside mirrors the uncertainty settling in John's heart. He grapples with self-doubt, considering how easily trust can be manipulated, wondering if he misread Alex's character all along. Did he let himself be blindsided by friendship? But the call for justice rings louder. In a moment filled with rising resolve, he turns to Melanie with newfound determination. I can't retreat. If we back down now, we're letting them win. We must bring our remaining allies together and stand against this. Filled with a renewed sense of purpose, John begins packing evidence for their upcoming meeting, steeling himself for what lies ahead. He will not let betrayal define his mission. Instead, he would use it as fuel to ignite the fight for justice. The weight of the battle looms, but he is prepared to rise above it all, determined to deliver justice for those who have stayed silent for too long. After the betrayal of a trusted ally, John felt a rush of shared anger and frustration ripple through the office. We can't let them keep treating us this way, he voiced, his words igniting the small group gathered around him. We've all felt the pressure, the unfair treatment. It's time we stand up for ourselves. Melanie stepped forward, her eyes blazing with determination. I've heard whispers of a rally. We need to mobilize and demand change. If we don't fight for our rights, who will? As they organized, John could sense a palpable shift in energy. The room felt charged with a fierce determination. Let's share our stories, he suggested, leaning into the gathering. We need everyone to understand the realities we face. Together, we can make a difference. With printed flyers in hand, the group collectively decided to take action. We'll call for a rally outside corporate headquarters, John announced, his voice steady with resolve. We need to demand better treatment and systemic change. On the day of the rally, excitement mingled with anxiety as diverse faces filled the streets. Look at the crowd, Melanie exclaimed, a grin spreading across her face. This is what unity looks like. John glanced around, feeling a rush of hope surge within him. The unity showcased resilience against systemic racism, each face a testament to the personal struggles they had all endured. But as he spotted security personnel gathering in the distance, a pang of anxiety crept in. We need to stay strong, no matter what happens, he reminded the crowd, his mind racing with the implications of their actions. We are here for justice. As the rally gained momentum, Sarah, the COO, made a menacing statement to the media, her voice dripping with authority. Anyone participating in these protests will face the consequences. This is a distraction from our goals, and we will not tolerate insubordination. The tension in the air thickened as police were called in. The potential for confrontation loomed ominously. Fear began to trickle through the crowd, whispering doubts into their resolve. But in that moment, John stood tall, raising his voice above the murmurs. This is our moment to be heard, he shouted, rallying their strength. We owe it to ourselves to fight back. We cannot let fear control us. As the police officers arrived, equipped for unrest, the atmosphere shifted again. Tensions escalated, and John felt the weight of authority challenging their right to gather, pushing back against their call for justice. "Stay together," he shouted, urging solidarity among the protesters. "We're fighting for our dignity." The rally turned chaotic as police began to push protesters back. Voices that once called for justice now clashed against the oppressive presence of authority. Amidst the chaos, John felt a tempest brewing inside him. This confrontation was not merely about a rally. It marked a pivotal moment in their fight against oppression. "We started this together. We will finish it together," he called out, gripping the hand of a nearby supporter, their determination fueling his courage. In that instant, he understood the significance of their struggle. This was not just a moment in time, but the beginning of a movement, one that would challenge stereotypes, break barriers, and ignite a fire for justice that could not be extinguished. As John stood firm against the tidal wave of chaos, he knew they were ready to face whatever might come next. In the wake of the community rally, the air buzzed with tension. Employees gathered in small groups, their voices rising in anger and confusion as they demanded answers from management. The atmosphere was charged. Empowerment was palpable, yet underneath it all lay anxiety about the repercussions of their actions. "Did you see how they treated us at the rally?" one employee exclaimed. "We can't let them silence us anymore. What do we even say to management?" another asked, frustration evident in her tone. "They never listen." Just then, John stepped forward, feeling the weight of their glances. "We need to hold them accountable. We deserve clarity and fairness, and I'll make sure they hear us," he declared, trying to inspire strength in his coworkers. Words began to circle fast. "Isn't he the janitor who went undercover? He found evidence against Sarah," whispered an onlooker. Admiration flickered in John's direction while maintaining skepticism, a duality he had not anticipated. As whispers grew louder, John took a deep breath, reminding himself that he wasn't just an undercover janitor anymore. He was a voice for the oppressed, ready to summon the courage to face the very injustice he had witnessed firsthand. "Hey, everyone," John called, raising his voice. "I know that standing up in front of management is daunting. I've been there, but we have to unite and tell our stories. This is our moment." With that, a murmured approval spread through the group. It felt like a turning point. The energy shifted, invigorated by the prospect of collective action. However, the reality of his actions caught up with him. When Sarah discovered John's true identity as the undercover janitor, the fallout was immediate, escalating the stakes beyond what he originally imagined. "John Matthews," Sarah confronted him later that day, venom lacing her words. "You think you can just waltz back here and challenge me?" "I'm not challenging you, Sarah. I'm fighting for what's right." John stood his ground, feeling a mixture of fear and adrenaline surge through him. "You've manipulated us long enough, and it's time for that to end." Sarah's expression twisted into a sneer. "You're nothing but a disgruntled former employee trying to reclaim your relevance," she snapped. "The media will have a field day with this." As the conversation escalated, John felt the pressure of the world crashing down around him. "Look, I'm not afraid of your threats. What you've done to people here is intolerable, and I'm not backing down. Is that right?" she hissed, her eyes narrowing dangerously. "I will make sure you regret this. I'll spin this narrative however I like." The tension hung thick in the air, but John took a step back, allowing the weight of her threats to wash over him. It was impossible to ignore the storm brewing. He knew that a counterattack was imminent. Days rolled into turmoil as John began consulting with his legal team, laying out a comprehensive foundation for the case against Sarah. "We have interviews, testimonials, and evidence gathered from employees who've been victims of her tactics," he asserted, trying to instill confidence in the team. "Let's organize our points clearly. We need to exhibit a pattern of exploitation," one attorney replied, focusing on the details. "The more structured we are, the sharper our case will be." That day, he felt a new sense of urgency, bolstered by the employees inspired by his bravery. "We are close to something significant, and I want to make sure everyone involved feels included. Their stories matter," he emphasized during meetings, fueling the collective resolve. But as the media frenzy gathered around their fight for justice, John found himself under a harsh spotlight. Articles began circulating, twisting narratives as Jack's supporters aimed to paint him as the villain. "What are they saying about me?" he asked nervously, scrolling through his phone, anxiety gnawing at his gut. "They're suggesting you're just out for revenge." One of his friends grimaced, feeling the weight of mounting pressure. "Every headline chips away at the trust we've built," he shouted, frustration boiling over. "How are we supposed to fight against this?" Meanwhile, Sarah retaliated, spinning a narrative that depicted John as a disgruntled former employee seeking revenge rather than justice. The media amplification created a whirlwind of negative sentiment, chipping away at the unity he had worked hard to build. But everything changed when new evidence surfaced. Footage from the protest leaked online. The footage showed Sarah's aggressive tactics against employees, shifting public sentiment back toward their favor. "Look at this," John exclaimed, the rush of relief washing over him as he reviewed the clips. "This shows her for who she really is." News anchors began demanding accountability from Sarah as public outcry surged in the wake of the revelation. For the first time, the tide shifted. As the courtroom drama unfolded, John prepared himself for the ultimate battle. On the day of the trial, every tense moment felt like a step toward justice. Witness after witness came forth to share their stories, the air crackling with tension as the oppressive weight of fear began to lift. As Sarah's defense floundered, the pressure seemed to crack her facade. "You'll never win this, John," she whispered, her voice tinged with desperation during a brief confrontation before the judge appeared. "Watch me," John replied, determination igniting within him. Every testimony elevated the stakes, and just when they thought victory was within reach, the final blow came. An unexpected twist emerged when a whistleblower from within the board exposed the corrupt practices that had enabled Sarah's reign. The courtroom erupted in shock as Sarah's manipulations began to unravel. In that moment, John felt the triumph of accountability rising, retaliating against systemic injustices as the scales tipped firmly in his favor. As the trial drew to a close, one thing became clear. Justice was not just a dream, but a reality waiting to unfold. With every heartbeat, John channeled the stories of those who had suffered, ready to reclaim dignity for all they had fought for, knowing that the echoes of change would resonate beyond the courtroom. John stood in the courtroom, heart racing as he felt the weight of every eye upon him. "Your Honor," he began, directing his gaze toward the judge. "Today, we stand not just for ourselves but for every individual silenced by fear in this corporation. The evidence we've gathered is overwhelming, and it's time we unveil the truth hidden behind closed doors." As he glanced at Sarah, seated confidently at the defense table, a flicker of anger surged within him. He could sense the tension crackling in the air, amplifying the stakes of their fight against her. The attorney for Sarah rose, a slick smile on his face, as he began to argue. "Ladies and gentlemen, my client is a respected COO who has made significant contributions to this company. What we have here are accusations fueled by disgruntled employees looking to harm her reputation." But John took a deep breath, steadying himself. "Respect is earned, not assumed. The testimonies we've gathered from employees reveal a culture of manipulation and discrimination that has festered under Sarah's leadership," he asserted, passion threading through his voice. Former employees began to step forward one by one, their voices trembling yet resolute. "I lost my job because I spoke out about what I saw happening," a woman declared, her eyes shining with tears of frustration. "Sarah had me labeled a troublemaker for standing up." John exchanged a glance with Melanie, who stood at the sidelines, supportive and fierce. Each testimony felt like a brick being laid in a wall of resilience, as more employees recounted their harrowing experiences under Sarah's regime. Then, a hush fell over the courtroom as a whistleblower emerged. The former assistant of Sarah, shaken but determined. "I can't stay silent anymore. I witnessed how Sarah manipulated records, covered up discrimination cases, and silenced true accounts of what happened here," the insider stated, casting fearful glances around. John's heart raced. This was the break they needed. As the whistleblower spoke, the narrative began to shift, illuminating the powerful figures within the company who conspired to maintain their hold on the status quo. "They protected her. I was afraid of losing my job, but seeing the impact on people's lives made me realize what's right," they concluded, breaths heaving from the intensity of sharing. Sarah's attorney snapped back, rising furiously. "This is collusion. These claims are unfounded. My client has always acted in accordance with corporate policy." The defense team came at John and the whistleblower with aggression, attempting to divert attention from the real issues at hand. But John stood unyielding, fueled by the strength of unity assembled before him. "I'm not just defending myself," he declared boldly. "I'm here for every worker who has faced discrimination and oppression. The truth is relentless, and today it will prevail over manipulation." The tension escalated as emotional testimonies poured forth, detailing the damage wrought by Sarah's tactics. One former employee passionately recounted the humiliation they faced when falsely accused of theft, an act of retaliation against their protests. With every passing moment, John felt a surge of empowerment, recalling the struggles his own community had endured. Each voice matters. Every story shared is a step toward dismantling this wall built on lies, he affirmed, raising his voice for emphasis. As new evidence was introduced, detailing fabricated documents linked to Sarah's actions, the courtroom shifted once more. Gasps filled the air as the secrets she'd carefully crafted began to unravel. Pressure mounted, and Sarah's confident demeanor faltered, transforming into desperation. Her composure, once impenetrable, now showed cracks. "This is all lies," she shouted, her voice shaking with uncharacteristic emotion. John felt a rush of triumph. Witnessing that vulnerability was a powerful moment. He had entered this battle armed with truth, and now it was paying off. Though tension simmered, John grappled internally with self-doubt and the grim reality of a justice system that had often failed people like him. Would they truly shine the light on all these injustices? Empowered by the support of his allies, John took a deep breath, stepping into his closing argument. "We cannot let fear or despair govern us," he said, his voice resonating with clarity. "We stand on the precipice of change, a moment that can redefine justice. This isn't just a case. It's a movement toward accountability." The room echoed with tension as the jury weighed their decisions. In the thick silence, John could feel the energy shifting, sensing the potential for transformation. Everyone understood that the outcome could either shatter Sarah's world or reinforce the oppressive dynamics they fought so hard against. John closed his eyes for a brief moment, envisioning a future where dignity was restored, where each worker's voice was uplifted instead of silenced. With renewed determination, he stepped back, awaiting the verdict that would determine not only his fate but the direction of the movement he had ignited. As the courtroom proceedings continued, Sarah's carefully crafted narrative began to crack under the weight of mounting evidence. John could feel the tension rising with every session, a sense of anticipation filling the air as the case unfolded. "Your Honor," John began, standing tall. "The evidence presented here today exposes the fragile web of lies that has maintained Sarah's power for too long. It's time for the truth to be revealed." He glanced over at Sarah, who sat with a steely facade, but John could see the tremor in her hands, the anxiety creeping into her demeanor. "Loyalty has its limits," one of the board members murmured from the gallery, casting doubt on Sarah's authority. The shifting loyalties reflected unmistakable discontent among the board members as their faith in her began to falter. "Who's next?" Sarah's attorney barked, trying to regain control. "This is nothing but a witch hunt." But the employees in the room, empowered by the testimonies surfacing, rallied together. Voices rose in defiance, sharing stories of mistreatment and injustice that they had suffered under Sarah's regime. "I deserve to speak out. I watched my friend get fired for voicing concerns," one former employee shouted, igniting the crowd's anger and solidarity. As tension built, a key board member, Marcus, took the stand. The atmosphere thickened with anticipation when his testimony began. "I've witnessed systemic discrimination in this company," he stated firmly, shaking slightly from the weight of his words. "Sarah has manipulated and silenced those who tried to speak up. I can no longer stand by." The courtroom buzzed with gasps as the revelations unfolded. The emotional impact rippled through the audience, causing many to confront their own traumas. John's heart raced as he watched the tide turning against Sarah. "Thank you, Marcus," John said, stepping forward. "What you've shared highlights the deep-rooted issues that are ingrained within our corporate culture. We must address these injustices head-on. Your courage can inspire the change we need." As the confession settled, the balance of power began to tilt. John could sense the shift in the room, the board visibly fracturing as former supporters of Sarah whispered amongst themselves, reevaluating their allegiances. Chaos erupted as the ramifications of Marcus's testimony spiraled around the courtroom. Sarah's allies scrambled to distance themselves from her, realizing they had been supporting a sinking ship. John watched them, a mixture of satisfaction and righteous anger surging within him. He had always known her tactics were flawed. Now they were exposed. As he observed the reactions on the board, he saw glimmers of terror in their eyes. They were no longer just passive participants. They were players in a game where the stakes felt dangerously high. "Your Honor, we can't ignore the pervasive culture of discrimination that has existed under Sarah's watch," John implored, his voice steady and strong as he prepared for what could change everything. The moment felt critical as he took a deep breath, emotions swirling within him as he prepared to deliver his closing remarks. This isn't just about one abusive manager. It's about a fight against a system that allows oppression to thrive in silence. With urgency, he addressed the jury. "Every person in this room has a part in this story. You have the power to demand accountability for those like Sarah who think they can hide behind lies. Will you allow justice to be served? Will you be part of this change?" As the courtroom hummed with emotion, John could feel the collective hope of the community riding on their verdict. With the closing statements holding the weight of transformation and empowerment, he knew they were on the edge of a monumental shift. The tension reached a boiling point, and every heartbeat that echoed in that room signified one thing. The community's fight for justice was far from over, and now, the truth's power was ready to shine bright. John meticulously combed through the company's archives, his heart pounding with a mix of hope and fear. Each folder he opened unveiled secrets shrouded in silence, The weight of injustice hung thick in the air. "This has to be here," he muttered to himself, flicking through documents that seemed to mock him with their mundane titles. As he dug deeper, he discovered files outlining a long-term strategy that systematically marginalized minority hires under Jack's leadership. "This can't be real," he breathed, disbelief mingling with rising anger. Each document revealed the insidious nature of their corporate culture, detailing how performance reviews were skewed and promotions were selectively granted. Flipping through the pages, he began to realize a consistent correlation between layoffs and racial profiling actively perpetuated by the executive team. This is how the system protects itself, he realized, anger bubbling up like a geyser. Each new page unveiled a deeper betrayal, striking a chord that ignited a fire within him. He could see the faces of those affected by this systemic oppression in his mind, their frustrations and tears pushing against the walls of his heart. "I won't let this stand," he vowed, clenching his fists. As he pieced together the evidence showcasing the systematic racism embedded within the corporate actions, a suffocating weight of responsibility settled over him. "I have to do something," he said out loud, his voice echoing in the silent room. In a moment of painful reflection, John recalled his initial ignorance, how privilege had blinded him to the injustices entwined within his corporation. Memories of his previous life before this awakening clashed against the stark realities others faced. "I can't be part of this system anymore. I must use my voice, my privilege, to amplify theirs," he decided, stretching out his trembling hands in a gesture of commitment. With the evidence in hand, he felt an empowering surge of determination as he acknowledged the power of the truth he now possessed. "This is bigger than me," he whispered, ready to confront the superiors who had turned a blind eye for too long. This knowledge was a weapon, and he intended to wield it for a cause greater than himself. He reached out to Melanie and Marcus, sensation of unity warming his heart. "We found something huge. It's time we take a stand against this madness," he said, excitement mixing with dread as he shared the evidence they had uncovered. As plans to unveil their findings took shape, John understood that this moment marked a turning point, not just for the company but for everyone who had been affected by systemic discrimination. He took a deep breath, preparing himself mentally for the backlash that undoubtedly awaited them. A brewing storm loomed over the impending confrontation. The tension inside him grew as he anticipated the retaliation they might face from the powerful men in suits, those who would stop at nothing to protect their legacies and secrets. Fear nibbled at the edges of his resolve, but he pushed it away. With a fierce determination igniting his spirit, John prepared for the press conference. "This isn't just about us. It's for everyone struggling against the chains of oppression. We're going to break those chains today." His heart raced with conviction as the moment drew closer, a quiet promise echoing in his mind. This fight was not just for justice, but a major step toward a future where discrimination had no place in their world. As he took his position among his allies, he stood ready to lead the charge, ready to embrace the challenge that would not just define him but change everything around him. With the trial coming to a close, tension swirled in the courtroom like a palpable force, each heartbeat echoing the weight of justice that hung thick in the air. Those gathered held their breath, caught in a moment where time seemed to stretch indefinitely. John glanced over at Sarah, seated at the defense table, her hands trembling ever so slightly. "This is almost over. We've worked too hard for this," he whispered to himself, trying to steady the storm brewing inside him. As the gavel prepared to fall, the air crackled with anticipation. A wave of whispers floated through the crowd, each person eager for the moment of judgment. The weight of unresolved oppression lingered, solidifying their collective resolve. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had assembled, chanting for justice, accountability, justice. The voices blended into a chorus, reminding the court of the lives impacted by Sarah's corrupt practices. Their united front left no room for complacency, and John felt a surge of hope intertwined with anxiety. Inside, Sarah huddled with her legal team, desperation shadowing her features as she frantically whispered to them, "There has to be a way out of this. We can't let this happen." Her eyes darted around the room, searching for someone, anyone, who could help salvage her crumbling empire. But the reality of the situation settled in like an anchor weighing her down. For every lie she had hidden behind, the truth was catching up. In chilling clarity, she realized the depth of her betrayal would soon be unearthed. Just as the judges prepared to announce the verdict, a key ally of Sarah's stepped forward, a middle manager who had been straddling the line of loyalty and self-preservation. "Sarah, I can't protect you anymore," the ally said, voice shaking and filled with apprehension. "The things I've seen." The courtroom collectively inhaled as the ally laid bare their involvement in the cover-up, detailing how Sarah had orchestrated a culture of systemic racism within the company. The revelation hit hard, sending shockwaves through the crowd, causing heads to turn in disbelief and then anger. Chaos erupted. The audience reacted with a mix of shock and elation as the allies' confession shattered the carefully constructed narrative surrounding Sarah. Doubts about her trustworthiness spiraled, draining her credibility like air escaping a balloon. This can't be happening, Sarah muttered, her face paling as she processed the ramifications of the confession. The hard reality of betrayal washed over her, and the fear of losing everything that had propped her up became palpable. As news spread of Sarah's deceit, social media exploded with outrage. Posts flooded in, demanding accountability, each status invoking support for victims who had suffered under her reign. Discussions on systemic racism, which had long been suppressed, reignited with vengeance. In that chaotic atmosphere, the judge called for the jury's final verdict. Tension tightened like a noose around Sarah's neck as she sensed the consequences bearing down on her, a stark contrast to the power she had wielded only days before. Guilty. The judge's voice rang through the courtroom, echoing off the walls and sealing Sarah's fate. The gavel slammed down, and the courtroom erupted in cheers, a collective cry for justice finally served. John absorbed the commotion, feeling the rush of hard-fought victory wash over him. He turned his gaze to the crowd. Hope glimmered brightly in their eyes, illuminating the path toward transformation. What goes around always finds its way back, John echoed quietly, feeling empowered by the moment. And sometimes, it comes back burning, illuminating the path for those who dare to rise against injustice. As he stood amidst the cheers, he felt the profound weight of history shifting, knowing this was only the beginning of a long journey toward healing and justice for so many. The path ahead was uncertain, but together, they would continue to fight for what was right. As he stood amidst the cheers echoing through the courtroom, John raised a fist in solidarity. This victory is for all of us. Together, we can ignite change and fight against injustice. If you believe in our cause, remember to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that challenge the status quo. Your voice matters.